Welcome everyone. I'm Scott Hill from flightclubict.com, and we're back for another YouTube whiskey review. Today we're going to take a look at the Four Roses Small Batch Select. I'm here with Stephen Netherton. Stephen?
Yep, Stephen here too. Excited. Going to talk about my favorite distillery.
Well, it's been a while since we've done this. It's been a couple months off. I've had some internet issues has been the primary reason, as well as some other kind of work-life issues. But we're glad to be back on. Hopefully our connection's a little bit better today, and we can get a solid review out, get a post up. This is one we've been trying to get to for about a month or so since this came out. Steve, why don't you tell us a little bit about this product, when it came out, what it is?
Yeah, so Four Roses, not that long ago, really, announced that there'd be a new member of the family coming out in the spring of 2019. And that new family member was, you can see it right next to Scott, and I got it right here too, the Small Batch Select. So other Four Roses fanboys will know, and fangirls will know, that Four Roses is not a large family. Actually, there's the Four Roses, used to be Yellow Label. They kind of revamped the label recently. That's the 80 proof bourbon that you can kind of see just about everywhere you go. Then they got
I've got it right here.
There you go.
There's the creamy label now.
Yeah, what you can call it, just Four Roses Bourbon, Four Roses Standard. Next up is the Four Roses Small Batch. We're going to try that in just a moment. And then there's the Four Roses Single Barrel. And then after that, you get into some more limited offerings. You've got the private selections. So those are going to be your single barrel store picks. And then you have the limited releases. There's a small batch limited edition that's been released annually for the past several years. And then also sometimes there's the Four Roses limited edition. There's been the Elliott Select, a single barrel limited edition too. But if you're ever going to talk about Four Roses, you have to talk about yeast, and you have to talk about letters that don't seem to make any sense. So what we're going to do is just a very quick crash course. But if you want to learn more, go to www.flightclubict.com. We have several posts on Four Roses to give you more information than you need to know to have an understanding of what goes on behind the Four Roses product lineup. But in a nutshell, Four Roses has 5 proprietary yeast strains, and those are designated by letter. Those letters are F, K, O, V, and Q. And then there's also 2 mash bills that Four Roses uses. Those are designated by letters too. The letters E, that's their lower rye mash bill, and then the letter B, which is their higher rye mash bill. So you've got 10 different variations once you combine the 2 mash bills and the 5 yeast strains. And so when people that know a lot about Four Roses hear that there's a new product out, the first question they ask is, okay, well, what's the recipe? They want to know, what are the yeast strains that are involved here, and what are the mash bills that are involved here? So let's revisit the Four Roses family for a minute. When you talk about Four Roses Standard Bourbon, that basically contains just a big conglomeration of everything. So put that to the side. Next, the small batch. So that is a bourbon that you're going to see at a lot of stores all around the country. And the recipes that the small batch contains is actually somewhat limited. It's just the O yeast and the K yeast, and it has the higher rye mash bill in it and the lower rye mash bill for both of those yeast strains. Okay, so it combines all those, and that's where you get small batch from. The single barrel Four Roses, the 100 proof single barrel, that's not the store pick, just the standard single barrel Four Roses. That's going to be the B mash bill, the higher rye, and the V yeast strain, the really fruity yeast strain. Think juicy fruit gum, think fruit punch. OBSV is going to be that single barrel. So then you've got this new small batch select, and everybody was interested in knowing, okay, what are the recipes that goes into small batch select? Well, here's what they are. Let's start with the yeast strains. You've got V, that real fruit punchy yeast strain that's in the single barrel. You've got K, which for a lot of people, that's a special yeast strain. That's a That's a wide favorite amongst those that do the private selection single barrel store picks for the single barrels. And then there's also F. F is in there too. So for V and K and F, for all of those yeast strains, there's also the high and low rye mash bill. Okay, so there you've got both mash bills with each of the V, K, and F yeast strains. And in case you can't get that all straight in your mind, there's a helpful little hang tag that goes on the neck of the bottle that sets all those forth, so you know what you're getting when you get a bottle of it. Anyway, take a big giant step back. What do we got here? Four Roses Small Batch Select ups the proof a little bit. It's 104 proof, actually. It's non-chill filtered. And then it's got these yeast strains that are going to produce something that's fruity, something that's spicy, and then also something that's pretty herbal, maybe a little bit minty. Throw all that in a bottle. You got Four Roses Small Batch Select. MSRP on this is about between 55 and 60 probably. It's running a little bit higher right now because it was released to a limited number of states right off the bat. So I think once we get into the nationwide release, this will settle into the mid 50s price range. And I've already enjoyed some of this bottle, and I can tell you I like it. I think it's a good fit within the Four Roses family.
Yeah, and I'm excited to try it here and review it for you all. We've reviewed some Four Roses products in the past, and a comment that we've always made is that Four Roses tends to hold pretty true to their descriptors on their label. You mentioned fruity, you mentioned spicy, you mentioned cement. Those are the things we expect to see, not just because it says it on the label, but because those are pretty prevalent flavors in Four Roses generally. But it really hyped up here with those three recipes, those three yeast strains involved. So I'm excited to try this one, get into it, and we'll come back around later to the regular small batch and see how it compares. But let's go ahead and get into this one.
Are you starting with the select or with the small batch?
Let's start with the select.
Okay. So for the select, I'm going to add a little bit more info here, because as I've had time to think about it. So select is bottled at 104 proof, so it's even higher than that 100 proof single barrel bourbon that is not the store pick. It's just the 100 proof OBSV single barrel. So 104 proof, I wondered how far is that off of barrel proof for a lot of these. Well, if you want barrel proof Four Roses, one of the ways you can get that is through their private selection single barrel store picks. I've got 15 of those, and what I did is before we got on, I went through and I added up all the proofs for those bottles, and then I took the average. The average for me came out of the 15 bottles I have of the barrel proof single barrel Four Roses was it's 55.78 ABV. So you're looking at about 111 proof. This is 104. It's really not that far off.
And we've talked about Four Roses rick houses in the past. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is it one floor rick houses? So you're not going to see a lot of variation in proof from top to bottom like you might see in some other warehouses. So they've kind of narrowed it down. It's kind of a sweet spot. They've diluted this a little bit, I think stylistically probably. But you're right. It's pretty near what cast strength might look like on this.
Yeah, the lowest cast strength single barrel store pick that I've got is 102.6 proof. The highest was 122.4. So I think a little bit lower than what you would see compared to other barrel proof products out there, your Knob Creeks, your Elijah Craigs, etc. So this comes in a little lower than those. As for the age on small batch select too, we should throw that out there. On Four Roses' website, they say that every barrel that they pull is at least 5 years old. What they said for the small batch select is it combines barrels that are 6 years old and barrels that are 7 years old in here. So as far as an age statement goes, this would have to bear a 6-year age statement to say the youngest barrel that's contained in there. But Four Roses went ahead and said this also contains some 7-year-old too.
It might be a hair older than the regular small batch, probably quite a bit older. From the yellow label of standard bourbon, which is, you're probably right, probably at 5 years is probably about it. So a little bit more age on this product.
And what I get right off the nose on this one is I get that K spice in addition to that 104 proof that really kicks up just a little bit. But I get a nice spicy herbal mixture. I think that F yeast strain herbal mixture really comes through even stronger than the fruit does for me initially on the nose. So a lot
Yeah,
of
yeah,
mint.
yeah. That's what I was going to say. The herbal, definitely kind of an array of herbal notes, but mint's really prevalent. Chocolate's one of the things that I get right away on this, along with those spices that you referred to.
When I had my first pour out of this bottle, to me it exploded with the fruitiness initially. Um, with some more air time, that's worn off a little bit, so it's not as strong of the. For me, it was like a chilled fruit punch Kool-Aid with a lot of sugar in there to really bring forward that fruit punchy sweet kind of smell. But as it's gone down a little bit and given more airtime, I think that has uh, brought the herbal smell right into the spotlight more. And so I think that's what I get as more of a lasting impression off the nose is that mint on there. And I think this tends more towards a spearmint for me. And I am getting a little bit of the chocolate in there too, a milk chocolate, not a dark bitter chocolate, but a milk chocolate along with that spearmint.
Yeah, I was getting kind of a brownie chocolate, and you're right. Just a little bit of even time in the glass. I poured this maybe 5-10 minutes before we started recording here, and that 5-10 minutes plus the amount of time it took you to describe the various recipes is plenty of time for some of that initial fruit burst to kind of to burn off, and the flavors really just kind of come together and marry together a little bit better. I get a lot of the I get some apple flavor along with sort of that fruit punch that you described. Probably some other kind of stone fruit, maybe some peach kind of apricot kind of notes. There's still quite a bit of fruit there, but it's really balanced very well with that herbal spearmint. You're probably right on with the spearmint. Those herbal notes, it balances it really well.
Yeah, and there's just enough spice there. It's not the kind of spice that is like a peppery spice that really makes your nose have to take a break for a minute. It's the kind of spice you can linger in. So more of a soft baking spice is what I get. Maybe a little bit of soft cinnamon sugar mixed in with some nutmeg.
Yeah, the nutmeg is what I was going to describe there, and it takes a minute to develop those baking spice flavors. They are a little bit more in the background of some of those others you described. Those traditional bourbon notes of vanilla and caramel are there a little bit as well. They're probably even behind those baking spices a bit.
Yeah.
It's a pretty terrific nose. It's bright. It's complex. It hits the right the right receptors with the fruit and the spice and the chocolate and everything. They're balanced together.
Yeah, really good nose. One thing to me that I think is kind of interesting is Four Roses in its marketing. You see it all over its website, or even if you're one of the Four Roses club members, they call it the Mellow Moments Club. Four Roses likes to push this mellow idea about its products, and I don't know if that's just to try to get more inexperienced bourbon drinkers on board, as if Four Roses is much more approachable. I don't find any of its products, with the exception of the 80 proof kind of standard Four Roses bottle, as mellow. I find it very flavorful, very complex, like you said. Mellow is just not a word I would use.
No, the herbal notes, some of the floral notes, the spice notes that you get out of Four Roses are not things that I would describe as mellow. I don't go to Four Roses because I want something mellow. I go to Four Roses because I want something different than what I get out of most of the other distilleries. Yeah, you're right. Mellow is not a word I would use to describe this nose at all.
Well, when I go into the palate on this, that for me is where that 104 proof really shows up, because there is right up front a, a fairly strong spicy burn, that's got a lot of flavor in there that you have to take a second to pick out. This has some heat right up front to it.
It certainly does. I might even say that that first sip drinks a little bit warmer than 104. There's a little bit of burn there. There's some cinnamon spice on there. There's some of that apple fruitiness that I picked up from the nose. Maybe some peach cobbler in there as well. You get some of that trailing baking spice on there. But it's pretty warm with that cinnamon spice and just the overall heat from it. It sits on your tongue for a minute. It's got to burn off for a second before you really start picking up on those flavors.
Yeah, and whereas the herbal notes came through pretty strong in the nose, they take a back seat for me to the spice first and then the fruit second on the palate.
I get some of that pie crust. I get a little bit of that chocolate there, not nearly as powerful as was on the nose. Maybe like some chocolate chip cookie almost. The tail end of the palate, that herbalness starts to come back. We're not going to get to the finish yet, but I start picking up a little bit of that spearmint again on the end of the palate, but not exactly what I expected from the nose.
Yeah, I'm almost picking up mid palate, so right as that initial burn starts to fade away, almost if you sprinkled like some red pepper flakes on some dried apricot. You know, it's that mixture of spice and fruit there that it's very interesting, and I don't really know that you get it with other Four Roses products unless you have one of those single barrel store picks that really emphasizes that kind of profile.
Yeah, the pepper flakes is an interesting one. I'm also getting there's some sweetness under there too, but it's almost like a sweet pepper that's dried along with some of that spicier pepper. It's an interesting mix of flavors there in the mid palate.
What do you think about the texture on this one? You know, this one's non-chill filtered. They made a big deal about putting that on the neck of the bottle, and then also with the press release they did on this, you know, saying, hey, unlike our others, this is non-chill filtered. Are you getting anything on the palate on this one that illustrates that non-chill filtration?
Nothing that really wows me or stands out. You know, a lot of the recipes of Four Roses, you know, kind of describe themselves as either creamy or full-bodied. So I tend to expect some of those kind of thicker mouth-coating flavors on Four Roses. It hits that. I don't think it's anything exceptional, but it's nothing that I would criticize it over either.
Yeah, the texture on this for me, I wouldn't describe it as oily. It doesn't burn off immediately. I'm not saying that, but I also wouldn't say this is really oily. It's not a chewy bourbon like some of those that really you need some additional age on there to really get that kind of characteristic. This one is kind of a middle of the road as far as texture is concerned. So what that results in, for me at least, is that there is a finish here. It's certainly not short, but it does, I think, dissipate a little bit more quickly than I'd like because that texture just doesn't quite stick.
As I get into the finish, I start picking up some of those chocolate tones again. For me, it's a very moist brownie kind of flavor. And there's some brownies out there that are a little bit mouth coating. And that's what I'm picking up sort of on the back end of the palate into the finish as far as the texture goes. It's just sort of that brownie chocolate mouth coating into the finish. I like it. It does stick around for a while, but you know, sometimes the chocolates can tend to dry the finish out a little bit and give it a perception that's not quite as long as it might otherwise be.
Yeah, this does get a little bit dry. Not overly so, but I think I would need to describe the finish as a little bit dry. And then there is that along with those chocolate notes, brownies are a really good descriptor. Even that, kind of crispy layer on top, you think about how that just kind of dries out your palate, mixed in with like some, either cherry or raspberry, some kind of red fruit coating along with those chocolatey notes. And then there is some on the very tail end of the palate. You get a little bit of that nutmeg spearmint mixture, just a tad bit. And it does hang around for a little bit, but it does dissipate, and then it's gone. You don't just sit there and think about this finish for a full minute.
Yeah, the more of those drying notes. I get a little dry oak flavor there at the tail end. As I think sort of that brownie sweetness is burning off. As you're right, it pulls into some of those baking spice herbal notes there at the tail end. I wouldn't call this medium long. I'm not sure I would call it medium short. It probably falls somewhere right there in kind of the middle medium range as far as length for me.
I'm going to leave a little bit in my glass to revisit after we do the regular small batch.
Should we score now, or do you want to visit the regular small batch before we score?
Let's wait and score at the end.
Okay. Any other comments? Any other comments on this one before we move over for some compare and contrast?
I think just, what I feel like are going to be a lot of people's first impressions with small batch select is it comes out swinging, which is nice. You're getting something that's new. You expect something that's going to grab your attention. And I think this does that in a lot of different ways. I like that this is not going to be a limited expression. This is going to become a regular part of the family, Four Roses says. And so hopefully we see a very nationwide, emphasis on the wide, release of this, that it's on store shelves when you want it. And I think it does that very well. If people bought this at a premium as soon as it was released, I sense that there could be a little bit of a letdown with it. That's not what it's intended to be. So once it settles into its position within the Four Roses lineup, I think it's going to be a great fit.
The party note I would have just on flavor profile of this is give this one a try on a fresh crack or just straight out of the bottle. Also give this one a try after it's had 20 or 30 minutes to kind of air out. I think it is very different from one another on those two experiences. So try it both ways, see how you like it. You might find a sweet spot in there for you where it just really hits the mark.
All right. Well, I did my palate cleanser with my passion fruit LaCroix. Not that I really want LaCroix to start sponsoring us or anything, but that would be amazing if it did. And I'm just going to leave that there for LaCroix to think about. Okay. Four Roses small batch. So this is, again, going to have a little bit of overlap with the Select, with the yeast strain K. But this introduces a yeast strain that Select does not have, and that's O. This also takes a decrease in proof down to, what is it, 92 or 94?
It's 90. It's right 90. At 90.
Okay, so this takes it down quite a bit, down to 90 proof. We're taking Four Roses at its word about this being at least 5 years old. I notice a little bit of a color difference for me in my glasses, but
yeah, the decrease in proof is very obvious. That's a pretty big jump from 104 down to 90. You pick that up on both the kind of the heat and the burn, but also just the richness of flavor. It's just it's lacking here where it was really there in the small batch select.
Yeah, so where small batch select had the F yeast strain, which is going to be your herbal one, this takes out F, leaves the K, but brings in the O yeast strain, which Four Roses describes as rich fruit, I believe. And so, you notice the lack of that herbal presence on the nose here for sure. And to me, what this has on the nose a lot is a mixture of vanilla and fruit, similar to like a creamsicle kind of an effect, where you get some of that peach or strawberry mixed in with that vanilla or cream on the nose. But it's a delicate nose. Even at 90 proof, this one is, you can really stick your nose in there and take a whiff, and it's not going to leave you feeling like you're all burned up.
Yeah, I get less of the apricot, apple, peach fruit notes that I got on the small batch select, and I'm getting more of the cherry, raspberry, rhubarb, strawberry kind of notes. And I've described this before as kind of having a strawberry shortcake kind of feel to it. I think more from the strawberries with whipped cream, as you were kind of describing, kind of that creamy vanilla, strawberry kind of flavors. It really hits that strawberry shortcake with whipped cream on it note for me.
And it's a nose that I described as delicate, and that's what I would hold to. I think for some people that in their minds they've always associated bourbon with something that's brash and really spicy and hot. This Four Roses small batch would be an interesting one to say, hey, well, what do you think about this? Because the ethanol or the heat there, oh my goodness, is very subdued.
Did you say it was the V or the K yeast along with the O?
K.
Okay.
So O is supposed to be rich fruit. K is spice. V, I think Four Roses described as delicate fruit.
And that's why I was asking that question, because I am getting some of that, what I would call delicate fruit. I said earlier I didn't get as much of that apricot apple, but there is a little bit of that there. Just not nearly as much as it is that strawberry fruit for me.
Yeah.
It's good nose.
Solid nose, and the palate really is solid too. So take away that initial burst of heat and spice that we got with the select, and instead substitute that creamy, fruity mixture just in spades. I don't know how you could identify all the different fruits in there. But there's a lot.
Very creamy. Yeah, you're right. There's a lot of fruit going on there, and at 90 proof, they kind of all play together and work together without really one standing out from another. I do pick up on some of the cherry, a little bit more of that apple and the strawberry, but it's pretty soft fruit married together with that kind of vanilla cream and caramel. Not a lot of spice on the palate.
Also a lack of that milk chocolate that was just a couple layers underneath each step of the way with the select. I don't think this has that. So whereas the select we described as being a little bit drier, this does have that very oily texture that just coats your palate throughout and does kind of stick in there. Because of the lower proof, it doesn't necessarily result in a longer finish or even an extended palate, but it's much more oily to the texture.
You get a lot of pie feeling with all that fruit, some pie crust. There's a lot of sweetness there, kind of a sugared pie crust, and then into that finish. I'd say on the finish is the first time I really pick up on any oak notes to this whatsoever. It's not a dry oak. It's not that chocolate oak that we described earlier. It's just a nice kind of fresh sawn oak flavor there at the end.
Yeah, this does a really good job of not tasting young, but not having oak interfere with the other flavors. I mean, for Four Roses, I think when they say on their website, hey, we don't pull a barrel before 5 years, obviously they've done their job on the R&D side to know 5 years for them is a sweet spot. where they're getting enough age that the youth is not a distraction. At the same time, the oak is no way overwhelming.
And not youthful at all. This is not something I would say is underdone. I might say that a little bit with the 80 proof Four Roses bourbon. It's just kind of a hodgepodge of everything. I don't have any criticisms for it at its price point, but this is not too young. It's just a solid product.
Yeah. On the finish, while that oily texture does keep it around for a while, I feel like there is somewhat of a drop off. So whereas I got the loads of fruit on the palate, especially at the beginning, and then it's intermingled with that vanilla cream, whipped cream, almost a little bit of vanilla soft serve. On the finish, it's like those are all just they're dulled. You take the lever and then you crank it back several steps. And so while I'm getting the same kind of flavors I did on the palate, no new ones are being introduced, other than a little bit of the oak. They're a little bit more dulled than I would like on the finish on this.
You will find some people that will prefer the finish of the small batch or the small batch select merely for the fruit sweetness that's inherent with the small batch, that strawberry, a lot of cherry in that finish, but just an overall sweet feeling to the finish of the small batch. The small batch select gets a little bit more dry, those chocolate notes. Some people tend to stay away from those. I think it's got a little bit more complexity to it, but that would be, I think, what some people's criticism of the small batch select might be over the small batch.
Any more observations from the palate or finish on this one?
No, just an overall lesser experience for me. It's a good product. There's some similarities in these two. Similarities in terms of I see some consistency coming out of those different yeast strains and mash bills. But these are not junior and senior. These are not just merely an older aged product of the same thing. They're really two distinct products here.
Yeah, they're definitely distinct products. And that is one thing that is nice about a product line that's not just bursting at the seams. Four Roses has kept it pretty limited. And so you can see where there is the standard, the small batch select, the single barrel. They're distinct, which there's something to be said for that. I was just noting on here as you were saying that on the finish, I'm getting just a little bit of a reminiscence of some heavily buttered, lightly toasted bread with just a dab of the strawberry jelly.
I won't disagree with that. It's a solid product. I have no criticisms of it. It's a $30 bottle. Our review today isn't about small batch. We've taken a look at it before. For $30, it hits above its price point for me. It's a bottle that I always have around. I really enjoy it.
Yeah, so let's kind of transition here out of observations about tasting notes into what we think about comparisons with scores and value. It makes sense to compare these two because the bottle looks basically the same except for the color on the label and then obviously the price. And so I think a lot of the buying public is going to wonder, okay, what's the difference? What's going on here? And so that lends itself to a comparison. So starting with the select and the nose on that one. And I wonder if what we should do is score these, starting with the select nose and then going with small batch nose and then continuing to alternate. Select nose, what do you think about score?
I'm at 3.5 on this nose. I think it's solid. I think it's the best part of this product. it's frankly the best part of any of this experience. I'm really enjoying it. It may even go up towards a 4 for me, but I'm kind of leaning 3.5. It's really good.
I remember telling you after I got my bottle that I was crazy about the nose on the Select, and I agree that it is the best part of the Select. So I would end up stretching it to a 4, because to me it's like the noses that I really enjoyed from some other higher proof bourbons. I would be more than happy to say that I'm more than satisfied. What we would describe for our 4 out of 5 for the nose on this, and so I think I would settle probably on a 4 on the nose.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. 3.5, 4. As you compare it with the rest of the experience, because I enjoy the nose more, and the rest of the experience is pretty satisfactory to me. I'm not getting into my scores yet, but I think 4 is a good score for it.
Yeah, for me, this ends up kind of stair stepping, and so I think 4 on the nose. I'm more than satisfied with that. I shift into the palate, and well, I certainly don't mind that heat right up front. To me, it ends up shrouding the flavors a little bit. And so I end up going just slightly down to a 3.5 on the palate. Not a knock. I like the palate, obviously, but I didn't like it as much as the nose. So I go to 3.5 on the palate.
Yeah, I would agree. And I'll take that right into the finish, stair step that on down, and probably a 3 on the finish. I'm not unsatisfied with the finish, but I'm not more than satisfied with the finish either. Those chocolate notes are nice, but it just doesn't wow me with length or richness of flavor. It's a 3.
I completely agree. Obviously didn't do at all the alternating thing I said I would with the small batch, but I was internally, I was mentally, as we were going through, because the small batch to me does not do that stair step. Actually, it is more of a kind of a bell curve. So for me on the small batch, it starts with a 3 on the nose because I don't really have any complaints about it, but it also doesn't wow me. The nose doesn't. So that's why 3 seems like the perfect score on the nose for the small batch.
Yeah, I don't disagree. There's nothing there really to dislike. At 90 proof, it just doesn't jump out of the glass. I would be interested to see this same product at 104 proof and see how those two compare. But at 90, it probably is a 3.
And so sometimes you have your standard bearers for bourbon in their different categories. So another 90 proof, probably about the same age bourbon out there that has a sweeter profile is going to be like Buffalo Trace. Do I like this on the nose any more than Buffalo Trace, which to me kind of exemplifies a 3 out of 5 score all the way across the board? No. I mean, it's a little bit different from that, obviously, but I enjoy it the same. I will, however, say that on the palate on this, I think the palate on the Four Roses small batch is the highlight. It offers a little bit something different. It does it very well. And so for the palate on this, I get a 3.5 out of 5.
It has some complexity to it. Knowing the price point that this comes in, knowing that it's 90 proof, I am picking up on some layers on that palate that I would not normally expect. I'm very happy with the palate. 3.5 feels right to me as well.
And then I go right back down to the 3 on the finish. I mean, it's a little bit more dulled flavors that I got from the palate. Again, I don't have any complaints. There's no off-putting note that introduces itself on the finish that I wish would go away. And so I'm just back down to a 3 on the finish.
I would probably argue for a 2.5 on the finish. There's nothing wrong with it, but it just doesn't wow me at all. It's a little overly sweet, a little it lacks in complexity for what I would want. As I look at the finish compared to the rest of the experience, it's its low point for me. I'm probably a 2.5, but I can live with a 3.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people will probably end up siding with you on the finish on this one. A like I said at the very beginning, I like the Four Roses flavor profile a lot. And so for those folks, you know, that I think they may end up with a little bit higher, but maybe for the general bourbon drinking public, it'll be there's a little bit of dissatisfaction with the finish just because there's not a whole lot there that wasn't introduced before, and it's certainly not as exemplified as well as before.
Well, I don't know that the public would agree with me. I think the public right now really likes sweet bourbons, sweet profile, sweet finishes. I think it has a sweet finish that a lot of people, you mentioned Buffalo Trace, it's a very sweet experience all the way through. I think there's some people who really like that. That's just not my style. So I'm kind of at the 2.5, but I don't, you may be right compared to what most people think on the kind of the 3 level. It's pretty simple. It's pretty sweet. It's nothing really to dislike. It's just not really my thing.
So one thing that I saw when the Four Roses Small Batch Select came out, what some people were wondering, is it essentially a substitute for the 2018 limited edition small batch? And some people were saying that because it has the same yeast combinations in there. So the 2018 limited edition small batch, the 130th anniversary small batch, had also the K, the F, the V yeast strains, but with a different mash bill, and obviously was there was a lot more age, and it was barrel proof. Okay, so take those differences away. Is this Four Roses 130th anniversary limited edition small batch light, if you will, the Four Roses Small Batch Select? You and I have both had the 130th anniversary. What do you think this compared to that?
It's an apples and oranges comparison. I've had it a few times. I wish I had a bottle right here we could compare right now. I don't. I'm not that fortunate. That is a great product, the 130th, and I just don't feel like this has that much in commonality to it. It's a good bottle, but it's not that. I kind of hate going here, but it's it's people who are the new Weller fans because it's the Pappy recipe. It has some commonality to it, but it's not the same product. It's not a substitute for. It's a good product, but I wouldn't make the comparison.
So here, the recipe for the 130th anniversary ranges from 10-year OBSV to 13-year OBSF, 14-year OESV, 16-year OESK. So you got that mixture of high rye, low rye mash bill, and then obviously the V, F, and K yeast. What's interesting is the tasting notes that Four Roses gives on the limited edition small batch. If you were to just read those, you could apply them to the Four Roses Small Batch Select, but tasting them side by side, I agree with you, completely different. And they should be completely different. One is going to now be fetching a price tag in the multiple hundreds of dollars, whereas Four Roses Small Batch Select hopefully is going to be such a nationwide release that you could walk into many liquor stores in any state across the country and grab it for $55.
And I'm okay with that. I mean, that's what I enjoy about this hobby, or whatever we call this thing that we do. This is something that we can readily get. It's an enjoyable bourbon, but it's not Four Roses 130th. And those are sought after for a reason. They're special. It's a great product. It's not this.
So we haven't yet done value scores and overall scores. Let's talk about value for a second. So for Four Roses Small Batch, you're going to be able to grab that for about $32 MSRP. Small Batch Select, we think, is going to really land in more of the $55 range. So starting with actually the small batch, the $32 small batch, where do you feel like that lands in value for you?
I'm not going to follow your rules. I'm going to give a score for both of them, and it's going to be 3.5. I'm more than satisfied with both of them. Small batch is a little bit lesser of a product, but $32, $30, $35 feels right. Feels a little bit. I feel like I'm getting a good value at that. At $55 is about what I paid for this. I'm happy with that. I'm more than satisfied with that. I would buy that again. I'm a 3.5 for both of them on value.
I think they're both priced correctly. $55 for a 104 proof, 6 to 7 year old bourbon. So that's going to be $15 more than their single barrel 100 proof Four Roses. I think that that's right in today's market. It's not asking too much. So that sits pretty close to things like the Old Forester 1920. I think this is just fine at that price point. So for the Four Roses small batch at about $32, 90 proof, it is about $10 more than your bottle of Buffalo Trace that we compared with it a little bit ago. But I do think it's a little bit better. I really can't complain about it. And so while I think the Four Roses small batch is a little bit of a stretch to a 3.5, I think it just gets there. Small batch select, I'm not ready to give it a 4 out of 5 on value. So I think 3.5 is about right. So if you end up arguing about decimal points after one, then you need to stop. So I think we can rest on just 3.5 for both. And I agree that that's about right.
Yeah, it's a good value. This has not yet hit our market. At least I haven't seen it. Have you seen it hit our market yet? I don't think it's here yet.
It's only come out about 4 states so far.
I can't wait for it to come out in Kansas. This is a bottle that I will finish, and I will pick up another one. It's a good value. I hope it's not $70 when it hits our market. I know there's some fluctuation. You talked about earlier that once it finally levels out, it's probably going to come down to that $55, $60 range. I think that would be great. If this comes in at 70, my score probably starts to drop a little bit. But at 55, 3.5 is where I'm at.
Yeah, so right now this is in Kentucky, New York, California, Texas, and Georgia, and also certain online retailers that will ship to your state, like Kansas. That's where I got my bottle. And so it is expected that it will launch nationwide, but we don't know when. And I'm looking forward to when it does, and I'm hoping that it sticks with this same about $55 price point, which is what you can get from certain online retailers, and then you have to add on things like shipping, of course. But I think that that's probably a fair estimate where we'll land. Okay, so overall scores for the select, where are you at, Scott?
I'm a 3.5. It's really enjoyable. I'm more than satisfied. I don't think I get up to a 4. I kind of, my 4s, 4.5s, and 5s, I kind of preserve for things that I'm really wowed by. But this is more than satisfying to me. It's a solid 3.5.
Yeah, I don't think it quite reaches a 4 for me either. I'm thinking about some of the 4s I've had, and they're, some Knob Creek single barrel store picks. Their Elijah Craig barrel proof gets into the 4 out of 5 category for me. This doesn't quite reach that, but it's a strong 3.5. And then back over to the Four Roses small batch, I think I would put that actually as a 3. Again, that's not a knock. I'm satisfied with it. It just doesn't contain enough special qualities to it to bring it up to a 3.5.
Yeah, I'm right there as well in the small batch. It's a 3. It's a 3 all day. I'm really happy with it. It's a bottle that I'll always have around. It's solid.
All right. Well, we need to find something to disagree with. And I think I know what we can. So Four Roses introduced this as another member of its family. And so when you think of the Four Roses family, you've got the standard bourbon, small batch that we've been talking about, single barrel. You've got the single barrel private selections and then your limited edition releases, and now the select. So that's 6. I'm going to put 6 members of this family. Okay. So here's what I'm going to ask you, Scott, is if you were to have a 6-man rotation on the current Golden State Warriors roster, okay, and I'm going to say these are the 6 players in that rotation: Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, Andre Iguodala, and I'm going to do DeMarcus Cousins because he came on strong the other night in Game 2 in the finals against the Raptors. So those are your 6 members. Who do you assign to their respective Four Roses bottles?
I'm from Wichita here, and Fred VanVleet has just been amazing. He's been holding Steph Curry in his place. You put us in a difficult position. I would say the limited edition is probably Durant, sitting on the bench right now, injured. It's hard to come by. That's pretty limited. I think your store pick barrel strength is your Steph Curry. Your small batch select is probably Klay Thompson. I don't know. He's kind of like your hidden gem. I don't know. That's my kind of take on it. And I don't know. You take it from there. That's all I've got on those.
I think small batch select is fair for Klay Thompson, and here's why. So small batch select has the good combination of 3 different qualities. It's fruity, it's herbal, and it's spicy, with fair balance between those 3 things. So Klay, he's a shooter, he's also a good intangibles guy, and he's a really good defender. So we've got left Boogie, Cousins, and Draymond Green. I think Boogie's your small batch because he's mellowed out compared to earlier in his career. So good for Boogie. And then Draymond is just whatever you need him to be. And so that's why he's the standard Four Roses offering. So it just kind of throws every combination of mash bill and yeast strain into the pot and stirs it up, and it's like, here you go. So that one's Draymond. He's, hey, I'm here for you. I'm who you want me to be whenever you want me to be.
He's thrown some combinations. So I think that's a fair observation.
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Well, I tried to get you to disagree with me, but I didn't succeed.
Yeah, somehow I got to the same end. I'm not sure how. With that, I think this has been a good one. This is a product that I'm excited to come to our market and share with more people around Wichita. But for those of you out there on the web looking at this on YouTube, pick up a bottle of this. I really hope you're as impressed with it as we are. It's been a good one. Check out our other reviews at flightclubict.com or on YouTube. Stephen, any other parting thoughts here on Four Roses or just generally?
I'm happy with this new addition to the family, and I'm looking forward to seeing this regularly on the shelves for sure.
All right, we'll sign off. Hopefully we'll come back. Hopefully the quality on this one's a little bit better than some of the last productions have been. If not, I'm getting a new internet service provider. So we'll sign off from there. All right. Thank you very much, guys.
Thanks, Scott.